Okay, you can go live. I'm admitting everybody. Okay, I'm starting to. Good luck.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.
Okay, you can go live. I'm admitting everybody. Okay, I'm starting to. Good luck.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.
Okay, you can go live. I'm admitting everybody. Okay, I'm starting to. Good luck.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. We just have about 21 participants.
Okay, you can go live. I'm admitting
we are
everybody.
expecting
Okay,
a few
I'm
more,
starting.
so we'll just give it a couple of minutes more before we can get started with the session. Welcome all.
Good luck.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. We just have about 21 participants.
Okay, you can go live. I'm admitting
we are
everybody.
expecting
Okay,
a few
I'm
more,
starting.
so we'll just give it a couple of minutes more before we can get started with the session. Welcome all.
Good luck.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. We just have about 21 participants.
Okay, you can go live. I'm admitting
we are
everybody.
expecting
Okay,
a few
I'm
more,
starting.
so we'll just give it a couple of minutes more before we can get started with the session. Welcome all.
Good luck.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. We just have about 21 participants.
Okay, you can go live. I'm admitting
we are
everybody.
expecting
Okay,
a few
I'm
more,
starting.
so we'll just give it a couple of minutes more before we can get started with the session. Welcome all.
Good luck.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. We just have about 21 participants.
Okay, you can go live. I'm admitting
we are
everybody.
expecting a
Okay,
few
I'm
more,
starting.
so we'll just give it a couple of minutes more. Good morning and welcome, everyone. Again, we'll just give one more minute.
Good luck.
We see. Good morning and welcome, everyone. We have about 21 participants in participant development programs, and this program is one such. Right, and we also involve in development programs, conducting a lot this of program is physician one such in our community, right? And we also involve in have conducting a lot this program is medical clinic one such in our community, right? And we also involve in scholarship conducting a lot this program is medical clinic one such in our community, right? We also involve in scholarship conducting a lot this program is medical clinic one such in our community, right? We also in scholarship this program is medical clinic one such and our community, right? We also involve scholarship this program is medical clinic one such and our community, right? We also involve scholarship this program is medical clinic one such and our community, right? We also involve scholarship this program is medical clinic one such and our community, right? We also involve scholarship this program is medical clinic one such and our community, right? We also involve scholarship this program is medical clinic one such and our community, right? We also involve scholarship this program is medical clinic one such and our community, right? We also involve scholarship this program is medical
Thank you, Shreya. I appreciate that. Namaste, everyone. I want to start by thanking you. Thank you, Shreya. I appreciate that. Namaste, everyone. As a parent, thank you, Shreya. I appreciate that. I can understand that. Namaste, everyone. As a parent, thank you, Shreya. I appreciate that. I can understand that. Namaste, everyone. As a parent, thank you, Shreya.
questions you may have in the breakout sessions, which will happen after Ms. Moudgal's presentation and the Q&A. Now I welcome Ms. Moudgal to share her extensive knowledge about college preparation and readiness. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishruth, for that kind introduction. Namaskara ellarigu, welcome. It is my pleasure to present on the college application process. Can everybody hear me? I just saw somebody post something in the chat. Yes? Okay. I want to say thank you, first of all, to everyone for coming out on a Sunday.
Recording in progress.
And for taking time out of your day, especially for those in Cobb. I know it's the start of a week-long break. So thank you for that. And also thank you to everybody who's working behind the scenes to make this possible. So if you can give me a second to just go ahead and share my screen, and we will get started. All right. So today's presentation is really a broad overview of the college application process from start to finish. We're not really going to dive deep into some of these other subtopics, but I'm hoping that at the end of this presentation, you will walk away with a good understanding of how the process rolls out and what the students' responsibilities are at different grade levels and what the parents should also be thinking about doing. So here's the agenda for today. We're going to cover timelines. We're going to talk about what students should be thinking about in terms of developing their profile, standardized testing, because that landscape has changed rapidly over the past couple of years, especially with the pandemic, how to build a short list, what you should be looking at when you're researching colleges. And we'll talk about the different applications available to students, and then we're going to finish with scholarship and financial aid. So let's dive right in. Let me start first with the general college application timeline. So if you look at how the application plays out, I'm hoping that what I'm going to talk about with respect to this slide in particular will quell some fears, because I know there's always a lot of chatter, especially among freshmen and sophomore who believe they need to be doing certain things. And some of it is true, but there's also a lot that you really shouldn't have to be concerned about in freshman year, especially. So freshman year, I like for students to focus on their academics and on learning. It is a transition to high school. And as everybody knows, the transcripts that you present to colleges are cumulative. So it's if you get bad grades in ninth grade, yes, while some colleges will understand, it is something that factors into your overall GPA. So I think freshman year should definitely be a year that's focused on academics and learning. And the same for sophomore year for the most part, right? So college preparation should really start in the summer between sophomore and junior year. I like to see students start to explore the SAT and ACT, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail when I address standardized testing. They're two very different tests. So students should really try to explore both tests so they understand which one's better for them. Junior year is the year that you really get down to preparing for the process as such. It starts with taking the PSAT in October of junior year. It is the qualifying test for the National Merit Scholarship Program. We'll talk about that in a little more detail as well. And then generally, I like to see students start to test, as in take the actual SAT and ACT anytime after the PSAT, and then get their testing done ideally by about June or July of the summer, right after their junior year. Junior year is also the year that you prepare to get ready for the application process, as in researching colleges, trying to understand, if you have a specific major in mind, and also to get your spreadsheets ready and to understand what the colleges are going to require from you in terms of documentation and things that you will have to submit. And finally, when you students get to senior year, they will start to submit applications in the fall, and the process ends with students putting a deposit down at one college that they will choose to attend on May 1st. So May 1st is a universal deposit deadline. and that's when the process ends. Oh, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Just trying to advise. Okay, here we go. So let's start with student profile development and what students should be doing to present themselves in a competitive manner to colleges. From a college perspective, here's what they will look at when they look at a student's application, and here are the things that they gravitate towards first. The first thing they always look at is the transcript. They're looking at grades and they're looking at rigor on the transcript. The one thing that everybody should understand is that when colleges evaluate students, they evaluate students within the context of their high school. So what that means is that they are not going to compare a student from one high school to a student from another high school in terms of the profile they present, the transcript that they present, and how many APs or IB courses they choose to take. And the reason being, every high school offers a different array of honors courses, AP courses, IB courses, and so it really wouldn't be a fair comparison. So for example, if you looked at a student who attended a school in the Metro Atlanta area, that offering is going to look very different from a school that was, say, in South Georgia, in rural Georgia, right? The offerings would definitely not be the same. So they are going to not compare students. They're going to look at you within the context of your high school, look to see how many courses, honors courses and AP courses the high school offers, and how many of those you take advantage of. And depending on how many of those you took advantage of, they will come to certain conclusions about who you are as a student. So that's the first thing. The next thing that and this is not necessarily in that order after the transcript, but they also do pay attention to standardized tests, the SAT and ACT, and the scores that you're presenting. We will talk a little bit more about the test optional movement. Fairtest.org, which is the website that I've listed there, is the website that houses information about schools that are test optional. And so that would be a good resource to tap into. They also look at community service and extracurricular activities. And one of the reasons colleges do this, and I want students to understand this as they're wondering what they should be doing outside of the classroom in high school. The reason they do this is because when they invite students on campus to be students and part of their program, they're looking for students who will be engaged on campus, right? You will participate in clubs. You will, I guess, start new clubs if you choose to do that. More than anything else, that you as a student will make campus dynamic. And that is why they look to see if the student has a history of doing that in high school, because the assumption is if you were deeply involved in high school, you will bring that same energy to campus as an undergraduate student, and you will make the campus dynamic. The last thing I have on the list here is writing skills. And here's what I mean by that. They have a certain sense for who you are as a student and what your abilities to write are by looking at your English grades. But the essays on the application, whether it is the Common App essay, the main personal statement, or the supplemental essays, do make a big impact. So it is something that students should pay attention to and should really put some thought into as they're writing. So when we look at student profile development, there are really two ways to develop your profile, right? The first is for you to pick a college that you really have your heart set on, and you scour the college's website and you say, okay, what are they looking for in a student? And you do everything you can to check as many boxes as possible so that you are you're basically preparing your profile for that one college. The other way to do it is to do what's right for you every step of the way. And your profile will develop in the way that will allow you to thrive and will allow you to be a good fit for a college that is truly a college that you will enjoy your time at, succeed academically and outside of the classroom. So clearly, the second way is the way to go. And here's why I say that. If students develop their profile and say, okay, I should do this extracurricular activity or that activity because this college is going to like what they see when I put it on my resume, the fear I have is that a student will spend 3 years of their life developing their profile for a college that at the end of the day could accept them or could deny them. And if they get denied at that point, it is almost a negation of everything they've done for 3 years. And that is not a good place to be for a student. So I always encourage students that if you're doing something to develop your profile, right, do things that either you're interested in or activities that you're going to participate in because you are vetting the landscape and you're trying to figure out where your interests lie and where your aptitudes lie. Because if you are truly interested in what you're doing, you will do a much better job of packaging it in your application and presenting yourself to the college. So in terms of student engagement, that is really what you should look towards. Also, please understand that activities that you would put on your application don't have to be structured activities that a college will offer, like summer programs or camps that you attend, right? If you have something you're passionate about and you choose to work on it on your own time, but that skill develops over time, it is absolutely an activity that you can put on your applications. So giving you an example, I've had students that were really interested in cars and working on engines and things like that. So I had a student once who's with the help of his parents, he bought a car that, needed a ton of work. And then he spent 2 or 3 years just building that car up. But just think about the amount of learning that happened during that time, right? He had to do research to learn about things that he didn't know about. And of course, he had a finished product to show at the end of the day. I've had students who've learned how to play instruments during the pandemic because there clearly wasn't much else to do. So don't discount anything that you're passionate about and that you pour your efforts into developing on your own. That counts as well. When we talk about what parents should focus on, parents, here's what I want you to think about. Your child at the end of 4 years of high school is going to move out and going to live on campus by themselves, and they're going to have to manage their life on their own, right? When they turn 18, you don't get to talk to their pediatrician. You get off of a ton of lists. And unless your child gives the entity permission to talk to you, you are not going to get any information. So as a parent, what you want to think about is what does my child need to learn in order to live their lives effectively and to be able to make those decisions that they're going to have to make and move their lives in a direction they wanted to move. So one thing I will say that a lot of parents do not gravitate towards is towards letting their children work. And I think work experience, it really doesn't matter at the high school level where you're working, whether you're working in fast food, if you're working as a checkout, cashier at Kroger or Publix, or if you're working at Target. These are all real world skills that your child needs to learn. So they learn to look somebody in the eye and have a conversation with them. They learn how to show up on time and have their manager rely on them over an extended period of time. And they also learn, besides people skills, they also learn how to function within an organization, which is all extremely important if you're looking for that first internship or more. So as a parent, we're in a unique position to understand where the holes are with respect to our children's soft skill development. And that's really our charge. That's what we need to push our children to develop, and that too while we have them under our roofs when they're in high school. Because once they fly the coop and they're on their own, you know that you're not going to have as much influence. The last thing I'm going to end with respect to profile development, is the one thing that students should stay away from. Please stay away from participating in things that you don't have an interest in, but you believe that it would look impressive on a college application. Because like I said, if your heart is not in it and you're not willing to give it 100% of your effort, it is going to show when you complete your applications, in the way you describe it, in the way you talk about it. If you ever have an interview with a college, it will absolutely show. So this is what I mean by do what's right for you. Understand where your deficiencies are, plug those holes, and go after whatever it is you're interested in. Keep in mind that when colleges look at applications, they prefer to see depth of engagement rather than breadth of engagement. So it doesn't make sense to be involved in 15 clubs and organizations at your high school, because everybody knows that you're not going to be able to participate in a meaningful way. But if you're involved in 3 and you do it starting your freshman year, to the point where you can grow into a leadership role, now that matters, right? So let's talk about standardized testing. Standardized testing, the landscape has changed so much since the start of the pandemic. So I will start with what colleges will accept. So colleges will accept the SAT, the ACT equally. They don't care for one test more than the other. So those are the two standardized tests that you would submit with your application if a college requires them. The PSAT is also important in junior year. In the 9th and 10th grade, the PSAT is just a practice test for the SAT. It really means nothing more than that. But in the 11th grade, it takes on a whole nother significance because it becomes the qualifying test for the National Merit Scholarship Program. That's something we can go into in detail. That's a whole nother presentation. But National Merit basically offers scholarship money themselves. The dollar amount itself is not that high. It's about $2,000 to $2,500, but it is extremely prestigious to earn National Merit, either commended, semifinalist, or finalist standing. And then also, where the big money really comes in is National Merit partners with colleges, which will offer everything right from flat dollar amounts, $20,000 scholarships, all the way to full tuition to full ride scholarships. So National Merit is a prestigious program, and the PSAT is the qualifying test. So if you are a junior, please know that some high schools will just offer it to all juniors, and you don't have to pay for it. In certain high schools, you actually have to register and pay for it at your high school in order to take the test. So that's something to be aware of. So let's talk about the test optional movement for a little bit. When the pandemic set in, colleges realized that many students did not have access to the SAT or the ACT. So many of them went test optional for 1 cycle, some for 2 cycles, and some for even 5-year cycles because they're testing it out. So what that means, if a college says they're test optional, what that means is that you don't have to submit a test. And if you choose not to submit a test, the college will evaluate you based on everything else that you're submitting. So clearly your application, your extracurriculars, they might ask you some additional questions in the supplemental questions to really try to get to understand who you are. But the standardized test is not a conversation piece in the committee's reviews that they do when they're looking to admit a student, right? That having been said, that changed this year. So the USG, for one, the University System of Georgia, actually started to require tests for students who were applying to any of the USG schools. So Georgia State, Georgia Tech, UGA, KSU all started to require tests, right? As far as test optional goes, the one question that comes to the table all the time is, if I've taken the SAT or the ACT, and the college that I'm applying to is test optional, should I submit it or should I not, if I'm happy with the score that I have? So this will come in play when you're looking at what we call the mid 50%. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail when we're talking about what you should evaluate when you're putting a shortlist together. But every college publishes a range of SAT or ACT scores, which is based on the current freshman class that they just accepted. So there's a low, an average, and a high. The general rule of thumb is if your test score is in the average to high range for that college's mid 50% range, then you should go ahead and submit your score. So test optional is truly that. Fairtest.org will list all of the colleges that are test optional. And you will be surprised, it's not just the tier 2 or tier 3 schools. It is some of the tier 1 schools as well. Definitely not the Ivies, but schools like UChicago actually went test optional way before the pandemic even set in. So it is clearly a movement, and it's really going to be interesting to see where this goes over the next 2 to 3 years. As far as the SAT and ACT go, they are two very different tests. And like I said, colleges will accept either or. So in sophomore year, and I would say in the summer after sophomore year, it really makes sense for a student to try both tests. And when I say try, I'm not suggesting that students take the actual test themselves, but you can take practice tests And if you're going to take practice tests, I suggest that you stay true to the timing per section, because that is one of the big differences between the SAT and ACT. So take a full-length practice test, time yourself, and then see how you do. And more importantly, what I want students to pay attention to is on which test did you feel more comfortable answering the questions? And here's what I mean by that. The SAT offers more out-of-the-box type of thinking questions, whereas the questions on the ACT align a little bit more with what you learn in the classroom. The focus is also very different. You get much more time per question on the SAT than you do on the ACT. So the ACT is very tightly time-bound. Also, the SAT is more algebra-heavy. The ACT is more geometry-heavy. So there are some very significant differences between the two tests, which should hopefully sway a student one way or the other. If you take both practice tests and your test scores come out kind of looking the same, and the way you can figure that out is if you Google concordance tables, you should be able to find like what a score on the SAT, what that translates to on the ACT. If they come out looking almost equal, I would say pay attention to how you moved through each section, right? Did you feel more comfortable answering the questions on the SAT or the ACT? Once you make that judgment as to which test is better for you, now you pour your efforts into that one test and take it maybe once, twice, 3 times, how many ever times you need to take it to get to the score that you're aiming for. What I see among students is that usually if they take the test 3 times, the scores start to plateau after a while. So unless you're willing to do something different the second time you take it or the third time you take it, you really shouldn't go there. Understand where your weaknesses are. Where did you lose points? Ask for a score report. And I think there's a way to sign up for that when you actually sign up for the SAT or ACT. And then when you get that score report, really dissect it and look at what your areas of weakness were, where you excelled and where you lost points. And that way, when you're prepping for the second time or the third time, you can truly plug those holes. And that way you'll see a bettering in your test score, right? In terms of testing timeline and getting ready to submit your applications, this is not etched in stone, but generally speaking, I like to see juniors get their testing done by the end of junior year. And the reason being that once you step into the summer between junior and senior year, there are other tasks for you to complete. And there are a lot of other things that you really need to be focusing on, and you don't want to have to be battling with testing at that point. Also, if you look at Georgia Tech and UGA, they both have early action deadlines of October 15th. If you want to have your test scores in hand prior to submitting your application to these two colleges, you ideally want to get your testing done by, say, June. Well, I know the SAT has a test date in August as well. You could do that, but definitely get it done by the summer between junior and senior year. AP exams. So students will start taking AP exams starting their freshman year if they take APs in freshman year. Please note that most colleges will not use AP exam scores for admissions. They use them primarily for placement once the student has gotten in and is choosing to attend that particular school. There are always exceptions to this. The IVs, for one, will ask for AP exam scores when you're applying to the school, and they do use it in admissions. But generally speaking, most colleges will not use them for admission. They use them more for placement. SAT subject tests, so these individual tests that you could take in like biology, chemistry, US history, those are obsolete. They don't exist anymore. Also, the writing section, while it does exist, and at this point, while I tell students, take it at least once, just so you have it to submit to a college if they ask for it, but also know that the writing section is really not something they pay very close attention to, right? So I would say the first time you take the SAT or the ACT, I would say take the writing section at least once. And then if you're going to retake the test, don't feel like you have to redo the writing section every time. Okay, so this is a really important piece for students especially. How do you build a short list of colleges that you apply to, right? How do you get a list together so that you're ready to hit the ground running when you get to being a senior, and how do you know what you even need to do to apply to these colleges? So I will say the first thing that students really need to do is to understand who they are. If you don't understand who you are, whether things like diversity are important to you, do you function better in a large classroom setting or a small classroom setting? Do you prefer individualized one-on-one attention, or are you an independent worker and you don't really care sitting in a freshman seminar with 300 students in it? These are the kind of things you really need to understand about yourself before you really start putting a shortlist together. So one thing I will say is that the putting of the shortlist together doesn't really start or shouldn't really start until junior year. But one thing that parents and students can do starting in freshman year is, if you take a vacation somewhere in this country or even abroad, if you're choosing to apply to international schools, right? If you take a vacation anywhere, take the time and maybe visit a college campus that is close by, regardless of whether you would even consider applying to that college or not. And here's why I say that. As a junior, when you sit down to do your research and you're looking at a college's website and they claim that they're a mid-sized college and they have about 12,000 students on campus, you're not going to know what that means to you as a student if you haven't stepped on a college's campus that is a mid-sized campus with about 12 to 15,000 students, right? So in order for you to understand and digest and make sense of what a college is pitching on their website, it always helps to have an understanding of what does a small school look like? What does a mid-sized school look like? What does a large school look like if they say they have about 30,000 students on campus? What does it mean if it's an urban setting? What is the feel of a college town? All of these really matter in laying the groundwork so that when you really start to dive deep and you are trying to vet colleges and figure out which one is a good fit for you, you know what those numbers mean and what those descriptions mean on the website. So even if you look at Georgia State, right, you can absolutely explore all of these different types of schools within the state itself, and you don't even have to drive that far. If you're looking for a small campus, go ahead and visit Mercer. Mercer has under 5,000 students. It is in Macon, Georgia. I wouldn't exactly call it a college town because the city of Macon does have a lot going on outside, but Mercer is a pretty small school, right? Then if you want to look at an urban school, go ahead and look at Georgia State's campus. It is as urban as it gets. There are no walls. Georgia State's buildings are kind of interwoven into the city's buildings. So it's kind of hard to tell where Georgia State begins and the city ends and vice versa. If you're looking for a large school, go ahead and look at UGA. UGA has about 28,000 students on their campus. It is a large campus. They have North Campus. You have to take buses sometimes to get from point A to point B. It isn't like you just roll out of your bed in your dorm and you can walk for 10 minutes and get to class, right? It is a little bit of a different feel. Athens is also the quintessential college town. So explore Athens and look to see what the vibe is like within the town and also on campus. And then, of course, Georgia Tech is kind of a mid-sized school, and so is Georgia State. So within the state of Georgia, I think especially in 9th and 10th grade, visit the schools not from a point of view of, okay, they are a prospective college and I'm going to apply to them, but visit them. And even if you're driving outside of the state, to get a feel for what these different types of schools feel like. And I guarantee you that if you do this often enough, there will come a time when you pull up a college's website, you read a description, and you're going to be able to say, whether as a student or as a parent, this is not going to work for me. This is not what I'm looking for. Here's where I feel most comfortable, right? So the reason I put a lot of effort into helping students build shortlists is because as a college counselor, it is important to me that when students go through the college admissions process, they emerge at the other end feeling successful, right? And what that means is that you should get more acceptances than you do denials. That's really where I want every student to be at the end of the college application process. So that when you're sitting down in March as a senior, and you're trying to figure out where you should attend, you should have choices in front of you. And you should be able to make an informed decision on where you want to attend and not have to choose one college because it was the only college that accepted you. And whether that happens for you or not is completely a function of how you build your shortlist. And here's what I mean by that, right? If you're going to build your shortlist in a way where you have maybe a couple of safeties, as in, you know you're going to get into those colleges, right? And the rest of the schools on your list are either reaches or far reaches, as in it is going to be a stretch. Like you don't exactly have the numbers that the college is looking for, or you don't have the profile that the college is looking for. That is not a good way to go through it, because at the end of the day, I don't care what students tell me in junior year, because I will tell you that there is a sense of bravado, when it comes to this in junior year. It doesn't feel good when you get denied by a college, because it's almost like a negation of everything that you've done for 3 years. So when students build their shortlist, I will say I love to see, maybe if they were applying to 10 schools, and 10 schools, 8 to 10 is a decent number. If you start to go above 10, then your workload really starts to go up, and then you really want to ask yourself, why am I applying to these schools, right? So if you were applying to 10 schools, I would love to see a couple of safeties, a couple of reaches, and the bulk of the schools on your list would be schools that we call target schools, schools that you have a really good chance of getting into. And the way you size yourself up and determine whether a college is a safety, target, or a reach for you is to look at two sets of numbers. And these are the most tangible things that you can look at, because once you start to look at the way you've developed your profile and what you have, that becomes a very subjective read, by the college admissions officer. So the two sets of numbers are the mid 50%, right? So where do you fall in that mid 50% with the SAT or ACT score that you have presenting, and the acceptance rate? So if you are on the higher end of the mid 50%, you are competitive for that school. Also, when it comes to acceptance rates, this is how I break it down. If you're looking at a school that has a 25 to 30% acceptance rate or lower, they're considered extremely selective. So your Vandy's fall into this bucket. Your, let's say, Tufts, all of the IVs, Carnegie Mellon, all of the brand name schools that, most people know about will all fall into that bucket. Between about 30% to say 55 to 60% is target range. And what's target for one student will look very different for what's target for another student. So it just depends on your GPA and the rigor on your transcript. And if you're trying to figure out what target is for you, I'm going to encourage you to talk to your school counselors, because they will be able to put it within context. And then, of course, if we're looking at 65% and above acceptance rates, those are generally safeties for most students, because they will accept more students than they will deny. So these are the things that you would really should be looking at. Also pay attention to things when you're vetting colleges. Look at location. If you are a child that was born in Georgia and grew up in Georgia, and now all of a sudden you're looking at a college in Boston, think about that for a second. What is it going to feel like when you're cooped up in your dorm for 6 months in the year because there's snow on the ground and it is just frigid outside and you're not going to be able to get out? Mental health issues, especially in college towns or on campuses where there are extended winters, is a real thing and should be considered, right? So if you don't embrace cold weather and you don't see yourself trudging through campus with a backpack on your back when there's 3 feet of snow on the ground, maybe you shouldn't be looking at colleges in that geographical location. So all of those things matter. Also, life outside of the classroom. What do you want to do for fun? You should find things to do for fun, because college at the end of the day is your home away from home for the next 4 years. And you should pay attention to what is it that feeds your soul? Is it available on campus? Are you going to be able to find people who are like-minded, who will be able to engage with you on the things that are important to you? And, if you want to study abroad, if you want to work on co-ops, those are things to consider as well. And also pay attention to the semester and quarter system. There is a big, big difference in how colleges go through academics. if they're on the semester system or if they're on the quarter system. The semester system is familiar to most of y'all because your high school will either be on a semester system or it'll be on something similar, right? Like it's an extended year, but you have fall semester and spring semester specifically. The quarter system is where you take sometimes 2 or 3 classes. You take it only for 6 weeks, but it is intense. Those 6 weeks are packed and you cover the entire year's worth of curriculum in 6 weeks. And then you usually get about 3 or 4 days, a break between every quarter, and then you do it all over again. Also with the quarter system, you tend to start much later or earlier, depending on whether the school is a co-op school. And also you end much later, where most colleges will finish usually in May. Some of the schools that are on quarter systems sometimes will not finish until the end of June. So these are things you want to pay attention to, right? Because it changes your ability as a student to come home. I don't know if you want to come back and see your other friends, if there's absolutely no overlap, and if that is something that's important to you, pay attention to that. The criteria that I do not want either students or parents to consider are, number one, rankings and brand name. And here's why I say rankings. Most times, a ranking is just kind of like a flash in the pan. Like it tells you, oh, these colleges are ranked, top schools for pursuit of a liberal arts education. What they really don't tell you, and what is hard to find, is what were the criteria that went into those rankings, right? It is okay to use rankings as a starting point to say, I don't even know which colleges offer the program that I'm looking for. But it needs to end there. And then when you vet individual schools, you really want to think about, like, is that school really right for me? Brand name also is something it doesn't matter what family we're talking to from which part of the country. Brand names are always on the forefront. And there is nothing wrong with brand name schools, but don't assume that just because they're a brand name school that they're a good fit for you. Ideally, you want to insert yourself into an undergraduate education setting where you are challenged academically, but you're not drowning in what they're putting out. And also that you have enough time and the bandwidth to engage in activities outside of the classroom. So the last bullet point on this slide is a YouTube video. Malcolm Gladwell is one of my favorite authors, and I think everybody should watch this video. It's about 20 minutes long. And if you just Google, why did I say yes to speak here? It is Malcolm Gladwell's speech at a Google Zeitgeist. And what he talks about is exactly this. He goes about it in a very scientific way to talk about how graduate students actually submit research when they're at selective institutions and non-selective institutions. And he talks about which students actually thrive in these environments. So I would encourage everybody to definitely find that video on YouTube and watch it. I'm going to pause for a second here, and I'm going to throw it out to any of my students or any of the other students in the audience. If y'all can just talk really briefly about where you started when you were building your shortlist in junior year, and whether that perception changed as you went through the college application process and when you were at the point where you were ready to put a deposit down. Anyone?
Anushka, do you want to take that question? Or Jyotsna? Yeah, Jyotsna, you're yeah, you can.
Hello everyone, how are you? So actually I'm a music therapy major, which it's a little hard to discover, like, okay, which schools have music therapy, like, what's the word? Like, which school teaches music therapy, has music therapy majors, right? So that was my first priority, that it has that they offer a music therapy major. So yes, like Miss Moudgal was saying, rankings. I used rankings to kind of decide, okay, which colleges might be best for me to like put on my list based on that. So that's kind of how it started, and then in that short list, I kind of organized like my reach schools, my easy schools, my target schools in that way. Some of the schools on my list obviously did not offer music therapy majors because there aren't that many in America. However, so for those colleges, I kind of looked at like, okay, would this be a good fit for me? Maybe I can see myself living there. Some of the other majors that they offer would be something that I would be interested in. So that's kind of also what I looked at. And then finally, when it came to like choosing my college that I wanted to go to, it all happened slightly because of process of elimination, and also because of kind of what, like financially, what I could afford, and also like what I wanted to do in the future in college. So I ended up going to University of Miami, which did end up having a music therapy major. So that was wonderful. I ended up getting a scholarship there. So financially, that was affordable for me. And also, I get to live in Miami. So it was a good fit for my lifestyle as well. So I know it's probably a crazy time, just like, okay, there's so many colleges. What do I do? Where do I where do I look to like make my list? Like, how big should my list be? How long should it be? And I guess people can give you like average answers, like, oh, you should apply there, like everyone's applying there. But it's good to take advice from different people, but like just think about what you see yourself doing in college. That's your first priority, because if you try to kind of follow what other people are telling you to do, then when you get to college and you're by yourself and you are responsible for your homework and your grades, you're going to feel a bit alone. You're going to feel a bit lost. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Jyotsna. That was very helpful. So let's move on. I want to make sure I wrap up with enough time for questions. So talking now about application types and application deadlines. So there are 3 types of applications available. Once a student has crafted their shortlist and now they're looking to see, okay, what do I need to do to get myself to the point of actually submitting an application and the supporting documentation. The first is the Common App. So the Common Application is one application that is used by over, at this point, I think it's like 900 plus schools. So the ease of using the Common App lies in the fact that you complete the application only once, and then you're able to submit to multiple schools. The only place where there are variations is in the supplemental essays that colleges will require. So you write one essay, which is the personal statement, and then sometimes colleges will have supplemental essays, which are really essays that you write and that ask questions that are targeted towards them. So for example, why us? Why do you want to come to us? Things like that. The Coalition application is relatively newer compared to the Common App. The Coalition it's a much smaller coalition. I think they're up to about, I want to say 250 to 300 schools at this time. It's the same concept as the Common App. You complete the Coalition application once and you're able to apply to multiple schools. And sometimes colleges have their own in-house applications, right? So UGA, for example, uses the Coalition, the Common App, and they have an in-house application. When you build your list, there is no right or wrong in terms of which application you use. That having been said, I will say the Common App has a lot more support built in, and it tends to showcase the student a little bit better. But when you're choosing which application to complete, you should really choose whatever makes your life easiest. So for example, if you're applying to 10 colleges and 7 of them take the Common App, I would just use the Common App for those 7 schools. If the other 3 have between a combination of an in-house application or the Coalition, then unfortunately, you're going to have to do whatever is easiest for the other 3, right? In terms of deadline, there are different deadlines that are offered by different schools. So I just want to break down the language a little bit. We're not going to dive into strategy at this point, but just want to explain the terminology. If a college has a rolling deadline, what that means is there's no set date by which you have to submit your application. You submit your application whenever you're done, and they'll usually get you a response within like 2 to 3 weeks after you submit your application. Early action is a non-binding deadline. So the early action deadlines usually come up in October, sometimes November. And what it means is that if you are ready to submit your application by the early action deadline, you go ahead and submit it, and the college will give you a response usually by winter break or early January in some cases, right? It is non-binding, which means you are not making a commitment. You're not saying, I will come to you if you offer me admission. You're not committing yourself to any one institution. It just means that your application is ready. You're going to submit it early so you can hear back early. Sometimes applying early also shows that you're more interested in a school than other schools. And so there's really no reason to not apply early action if your application is ready, right? Early decision is the one that you have to be a little bit careful about. Early decision is an application type where you are making a commitment and you're telling the college, I'm going to apply by your ED deadline. And if you accept me, I will come. And that means that I really don't care about whether you're going to offer me financial aid or not. I have already crunched the numbers. I know that this is doable. You are the one school for me, so I'm all in. If you apply ED, there are limitations to where else you can apply early. So in most cases, you cannot apply early to any other private schools. You can apply early to state schools, but it does change the way you approach the application process. ED is not for everybody. You should single-mindedly know that that college is the place for you. And also, there should be an appetite for the family to pay whatever the college is going to ask for, right? Regular decision is just that. It is a regular deadline. The deadlines usually come up in January, and that is usually the last deadline by which you can apply to most colleges. So it is just that. So if you apply ED to one school, then you would have to apply regular decision to all of the other schools. The last deadline that I want to point out is something called a scholarship deadline. It's also called a priority deadline. So if colleges offer scholarships sometimes, they will ask you to submit your application by a certain date so that you can be considered for all of those merit scholarships. So Auburn, for example, has a scholarship deadline of December 1. Georgia Tech, if you apply by the October 15th early action deadline, your name gets thrown in the hat automatically for scholarships. So if you're going to apply to the school and you can get your application done in time by the scholarship or priority deadlines, I would definitely encourage students to do that. So I'm going to finish with scholarships and financial aid. So there are two types of financial aid forms that colleges will generally ask families to complete. The first is called the FAFSA. It's the free application for federal student aid. It opens on October 1 of the student's senior year, and parents will generally complete the FAFSA with what is called prior year's taxes. So the way you want to think about it is that as a parent, if you're completing the FAFSA in October of your student's senior year, you will complete it using the tax information that you just filed in the April prior, right? So that's a general rule of thumb. Most colleges will ask for FAFSA. And I would say, regardless of whether you believe you will receive financial aid or not, it is a good idea to complete the FAFSA because sometimes colleges will use it as proof of lawful presence just to make sure you're in the country legally. So that's something you definitely want to do. Every college has its own internal deadline for FAFSA, and that does not tie in with the application deadline. So the earliest financial aid deadlines usually come up in December of the student's senior year, and then they kind of move forward from there. Besides the FAFSA, there is another financial aid application called the CSS. Oh, I'm sorry, just one other thing. Please make sure that if you're completing the FAFSA, you go to the right website, and I think it's fafsa.ed.gov. It's a .gov website, and you should never, ever pay money to complete the FAFSA. That's why it's called the free application for federal student aid. There are a lot of other sites that make you pay a fee, and you want to stay away from those. The second financial aid application is called the CSS. It's also called the profile. It also opens on October 1, and it can be found on College Board's website. So the CSS is used primarily by private schools. The only two public schools that I'm aware of that use it are Georgia Tech and Michigan. So when colleges have endowment money, which is private money, in their coffers, they use the CSS to make determinations on who gets it. So CSS money is not tied either to merit or need most of the time, which is why I tell students that if you're applying to a school that will accept the CSS, please go ahead and complete it, because you never know if you're going to get money or not, right? And ideally, at the end of the day, as you move through the college application process, as a parent or a student, you want to make sure you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's. And this would be one way of doing it. Besides that, there are two types of scholarships. There are community scholarships and college scholarships. College scholarships are the ones clearly that colleges offer. You will find that information on their scholarship page. If you're considering applying to any of those and you feel like you meet the criteria, make sure you're paying attention to the deadline and noting whether it changes the deadline by which you apply to the college as a whole. Community scholarships are anything right from your $500 Lions Club scholarship all the way to your $20,000 Coca-Cola scholarship and a whole bunch of others. If your high school uses Naviance, there are usually lists available in Naviance for community scholarships, or you can also look at portals such as fastweb.com, scholarships.com, and there are hundreds of scholarships there. And that ends our presentation for this morning. So I am going to open it up to questions at this point. Thank you.
Vishrat will ask the questions that were actually posted in the chat, Ms. Moudgal. I'll unmute Vishrat.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Moudgal, for that wonderful presentation. I'm sure this helped answer many questions students and parents had. So we have selected a few questions from the chat to answer in our 20-minute Q&A session. We have approximately, I think, 9. The first question is this, about AP exams. What does it mean when colleges only consider AP exams for placement and not for anything else?
There we go. What it means is that, if you look at the SAT and ACT, right, the colleges will actually use your scores to determine whether you are a good fit for their school or not. But when it comes to AP exam scores, they're not factoring that into the decision. So, for example, let's just say you did really well on the SAT and you got a 1580 out of a 1600. But your AP exam scores are not that hot. So maybe you got a 2 on a couple of exams, you got a 3 on one, and maybe a 5 on the other. They are not going to look at the SAT scores and say, oh my gosh, the student is a really strong student, but their AP exam scores do not match up. So maybe we need to rethink the student. So they're not going to consider that at all. But if you look at AP exam scores, the reason you take an AP exam is so that if you earn the prerequisite score, then you can place out of that class in college and you don't have to take it. And that's what I mean by placement. So if you pass the US history exam with a 5 or a 4, the college is going to say, okay, you already took a college level course in high school. You earned the prerequisite score. So now you don't need to take US history as your gen ed credit in freshman year.
Thank you. The next question is, what do you think about taking help from external college prep agencies?
I will say that is the family's prerogative. And I'm going to tell you where I come from. And my students who are in the audience have heard me say this before. This is the way I look at it. If you are going to send your child off to college and have them be responsible for decision-making once they are a freshman, I would want to know that they can navigate the college application process themselves. There are several presentations that are conducted. There are high school counselors that will make presentations to students, which will give you everything you need to know in order to get through the process. If you're going to use an outside college counselor, right? I mean, again, that is certainly your prerogative, but I'm wondering how actively your child is going to be involved in that process. Are they processing information for themselves? Are they trying to make sense of it? Are they reaching out when they don't understand something? Are they actively navigating it and successfully, which will then tell you as a parent that they can do this on their own when they're on campus and they're by themselves. And I think I would want to know that my child can do that before I send them off. And I think some of that is taken away when you employ a college consultant, because they, again, are helping you figure things out. They are the active voice. And also, you always have to be careful in how much help you get with your essays, because if a consultant's voice is a little too loud, it comes through on the essay and it stifles the student's voice. And that would never be a good thing when you're applying to college.
Okay. The next question is it better to apply early or regular?
So here's how I will answer that question. As I mentioned before, an early decision application is definitely not the right thing for every family, because the finances have to line up. Your student should be single-minded about that particular school. But early action, there is no reason not to apply early action, because all that means is that you get your application ready by that deadline, and that way you can hear back from the college earlier. The one thing I want to point out, and this is more about strategy, if you look at a school like Tulane, for example, right? So Tulane has an early action deadline. They have two ED deadlines. They have an ED1 and an ED2 deadline, and then they have a regular decision deadline. In a case where a college has multiple ED deadlines and they have an early action deadline, if you apply by the regular decision deadline, that is going to be an extremely competitive pool, because they would have already recruited from the early rounds, both from students who are willing to commit and students who are applying early action because they feel they have what it takes to get into a school like Tulane. So it's a little bit more strategic there, which is why I tell students, if there is an early action deadline available and you're not committing to anything, that would be a good way to go, unless you see that your profile, and I'm looking at the tangible numbers like your mid 50% SAT or ACT score, or your mid 50%, let's just leave it at that, is so far out from the norm that you're not competitive.
These next two questions are about scholarships. So the first one is, do colleges give scholarships to early decision applicants? And the second one is, are there any scholarship programs available for international students?
So with respect to ED, I will say that if a student applies ED, the college is determining that finances are not an issue, and the student will come regardless of the package they put in front of the student. So in most cases, you will not get a financial aid package back when you receive your decision from an ED application. And number two, there really is no incentive for the college to offer, especially merit scholarships, to ED students, because they know that even if they don't offer that money, the student has already committed to coming. So that's one thing you really have to keep in mind when you apply ED, which is why I say the finances definitely have to line up. As for scholarships for international students, there are scholarships available. It just depends on the college. And I would say once you've done your research and you've kind of put your shortlist together, you definitely want to get on the college's scholarship page to see if they offer scholarships, especially for international students. But there definitely are ones available.
So this next question is, what are the cons of taking a gap year?
That's a good question. So let me just look back to the past couple of years and tell you why some students took a gap year. Some students that applied 2 cycles ago took a gap year because they anticipated the pandemic kind of continuing the following year, and they were like, I don't want to be doing online schooling, when the college is not offering in-person classes. So I think that is legitimate. But regardless of why you want to take a gap year, I think a gap year is effective only if you have a plan in place for what you're going to do during that 1 year. Are you going to be working a job? Are you going to be traveling the world with purpose? Are you going to be able to develop certain skills that you will have to present to somebody at the end of that year when you take a gap year? If you don't have a solid plan, I don't think it's a good idea, because the other downside to taking a gap year is that students lose momentum. So if you're in the zone as a senior in high school and you know how to study, you know how to put in the time, you're disciplined, you get it done, and all of a sudden you move into an entire year when there are no constraints on your time at all. My question is, what are you going to do with that, right? And so if you find it hard to get back in the zone when you get back on campus after a break of a year as a freshman, then you truly want to think about what that gap year is going to do for you.
So this next question is, does it really matter how many times you take the SAT or ACT tests, and does it affect the admissions process?
So it doesn't matter. You can take it as many times as you want to take it. But like I said, if a student is going to take the SAT or ACT, whether it's a second time or a third time or a fourth time, I want to know that you are truly doing something different in terms of prep before you take it a second or a third time. Because otherwise, you're not going to see the gains that you want to see, and then that can be frustrating. From an admissions perspective, there are very few schools. Well, actually, let me take a step back. So there are several colleges that do what they call super scoring, right? So what they will say is that if you took the SAT or the ACT multiple times, we're going to take the highest score from each section across multiple sittings. We're going to put that together and create a super score which shines the best light on you, and that's what we're going to use. There are more schools that super score the SAT than do the ACT. And so when a college super scores, then you would send, if you took it 5 times, you would send all of your scores to them, and then they will kind of figure it out. But there are also some schools, like some of the Ivies, and I think Yale is an example, where regardless of the super scoring aspect, they want to see every test that you've taken. Even if one of the subsections does not contribute towards a super score. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know why they asked that. All I will say is that if they ask that, they're clearly reading into progression or something else on that end. But more than anything else, keeping the student in mind, the anxiety aspect of this, I would say 3 is kind of average. And again, you want to make sure that you're being very purposeful every time that you choose to take it again.
Okay. The next question is, someone would like you to shed more importance of volunteering.
Okay, Vishwat, you faded out there a little bit. I'm assuming you want to talk about volunteering?
Yeah, the importance of volunteering and shadowing.
Yeah. So shadowing, I think you're talking mostly about students that are looking to go in the medical field, and that is extremely valuable. I'll position this 2 ways. You want to shadow and you want to do volunteer work within organizations for the reason that it helps you learn more about that industry, and hopefully it'll help guide you and help you understand whether that's something that you could look at as a career or not, right? From the other perspective, which is what kind of student does that make you when you set foot on your undergraduate campus? I think volunteering and community service are extremely important, because at the high school level, it teaches students to think beyond themselves and to think about ways that they can give back to their community. But it also forces students to step out of their comfort zone sometimes and make connections with people they don't know and navigate a new landscape. And that, as a soft skill, is extremely valuable when you set foot on campus as a freshman in college and you know nobody, right? And now the way you make a large school smaller for yourself is by participating in clubs and organizations and finding your people within those clubs and organizations. And if you don't have the practice having done it in high school, you are going to hesitate to do it in college, and then it doesn't make for as much of a good experience for you in college. So I think that is the value. But that being said, colleges, in terms of your resume, will always value community service. And so that's something to think about as well.
This next question is, how would I go about understanding the cost for college education?
That's a very good question. So if you get on a college's website, right, most times when they talk about the undergraduate price tag, that is ticket price. But not everybody pays ticket price. So on every college's website, in the search bar, if you type in net price calculator, it will bring up a financial calculator that is required to be available on every college's website. That financial calculator will estimate the cost of attendance for the student based on the parent's financial situation. So the net price calculator can be a quick, 10-minute questionnaire where they ask you a few questions about the family's income and, a few other things, and then they will spit out a cost of attendance. Now, one thing to remember is that the cost of attendance does not include merit scholarships. So if the student ends up earning merit scholarships, that is icing on the cake. But the net price calculator is always good to work, especially for out-of-state schools. For our students here, because the out-of-state schools will not have the Hope Scholarship, available to the students.
This next question is, what is the difference between test optional and test blind? And do all colleges consider super scoring?
So not all colleges will consider super scoring. And if a college super scores, it will definitely be listed on the college's undergraduate admissions page. So you want to pay attention to that. The difference between test blind and test optional, if a college is test blind, like the UC system, the University of California system went this year, even if you submit a test score, they're not going to look at it, right? Because they have told themselves that in their evaluation of a student, the test scores do not matter. In a test optional school, you have the ability to submit a test score if you have been happy with it. And then again, the college will evaluate you using that test score as part of your file. So that is the main difference. With test blind schools, they just won't even consider it if you send it in.
Okay, I think this concludes our Q&A session with Ms. Moudgal. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question, just ask it again in the breakout rooms, and I'm sure every student will answer it for you. I think I can pass it on to Diwakar.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Vishrat. I am Diwakar, President for Nrupatunga Kannada Kuta for this year. Wow, it was such a great session. As a parent, I found this very informative session and answered most of my questions. And I'm sure you all found this session and the profound guidance from the panel to be very helpful. Our heartfelt thanks to our esteemed guest, Sumana Moudgal, for your comprehensively informative presentation. And Nrupatunga Kannada Kuta is highly appreciative of your time. Yeah, thank you so very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So moving on with the session, Supriya will share more information about breakout rooms and other details. Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to mention that we got a lot of feedback on the chat and my personal chat also, that this was really helpful, Sumana, and you are amazing. So thank you again.
No, thank you, Mangla. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. So Shripriya, I'll unmute you and you can go ahead with the next. Yeah, go ahead next. Thank you.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We can.
So yeah, I'm Shripriya, and now we are going to be breaking out into smaller groups. There are 5 breakout rooms, one for Georgia Tech, one for Emory, one for UGA, one for out-of-state colleges, and there's also a main session, which will include second and third year students. The main session will be focused more on campus life, dorms, etc. You can join and drop out of the breakout rooms as you wish, but you can only be in one of them at a time. And all of the sessions are going to be recorded. And at this time, I would like to ask all the student speakers to turn on their video. Okay. So in the Georgia Tech session, we have Kirti Bhardwaj, who's a first-year student majoring in math in the business pathway, Vishrat Madhusudan, a first-year student majoring in industrial engineering with a minor in computer science, and Rohan Shiknis, a first-year student majoring in computer science. For the Emory session, we have Advik Bhardwaj, who is a first-year student studying neuroscience and behavioral biology, and Anushka Jain, a first-year student majoring in quantitative science with the biology track. For the session on out-of-state colleges, we have Jyotsna Rao, a second-year student at University of Miami, who is majoring in music therapy with a minor in psychology. In the main session, we have Amol Gadekar, a second-year neuroscience major with a health, medicine, and society minor, who is following the pre-med track at Georgia Tech. We also have Varsha Ramachandra, a third-year student at UGA, majoring in biology with a minor in women's studies. She's on the pre-veterinary track. Finally, I'm Shripriya Srinivas, a freshman at UGA. I'm majoring in biological engineering. And if you all want to know more about the student speakers, you can read their bios, which were sent out in the email regarding this seminar. Okay, I hope I didn't miss out on anything else.
So I'm opening all the rooms now, so everybody can join, and I'm also going to unmute and I'll give you everybody an opportunity to unmute themselves. Thank you. So all kids can go to your respective rooms. Let me know if you're able to see the breakout rooms. And please go to the breakout rooms and you can talk to the students. Shripriya, you can go to UGA and everyone else also. I hope you are seeing the rooms.
Mangala, I'm not able to see the room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm able to see. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. There are rooms with respect to the colleges. So. So breakout rooms will be available on the Zoom itself. You can see, you can click on the breakout rooms and join the room that you want to. There will be a join right next to the name, and then you can choose the room that you want to go to.
Shripriya, are you having any trouble getting into the UGA breakout room?
Yeah, I don't see it on my screen anymore.
Okay, so it's at the breakout rooms is one of the options at the bottom of the screen, right next to where you see record option, right next to reactions at the bottom. You don't see it?
I don't see it. I don't see it.
Okay. Have you logged in from your computer or the phone?
The computer.
Okay.
So you're not able to see the.
No.
Okay. Let me admit you. Okay, just give me a second.
Okay.
Stop the video. Varsha and Amog, we have some people in the main session as well. So if you have any insights that you can share about college life and, Varsha, you're doing, I know, an internship, and Amog, I know you're a sophomore and you're doing a lot of things in volunteering and all that. So you guys can just share your experiences, and people can ask questions depending on that.
Sure. So I'm a third year here at UGA. I'm a bio major on the pre-veterinary track. I will apply to vet school next year. If you have any questions about, the application process or what UGA is like, feel free to ask questions. Amog, you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a second year at Georgia Tech and I'm majoring in neuroscience. I'm on the pre-med track, so I guess in some ways there are similarities to the pre-vet track. I've been involved in many different things I got on campus. I'm a part of student government. I do research. I also do volunteer at other locations. And if you have any questions about that or anything pertaining to applying to medical schools, I can do my best to answer them as well.
Yeah, I see some people on the call. Anybody has questions?
I got a question.
Sure.
I don't know how, whether you guys applied for Georgia Tech and for UGA. So if you guys did, any of you did, what was the difference in experience and expectations between the two?
Amog, you want to take that?
Yeah, I got it. I guess one big difference was the way I applied. I think for Georgia Tech, I applied through the common application because I think at the time, Georgia Tech was a part of that. And then for UGA, I had to apply separately on its in-house application, which was a little different and a little more cumbersome because I had to manage two different application styles and platforms. But aside from that, I feel that they were pretty similar. I think also looking at the different resources and things you can do at each university was different as well. For UGA, I had to look a little harder at what the different research opportunities were. And since it is a larger school, they were able to publicize more of their biology related research programs. But at Georgia Tech, it's a little different because it's a tech school. So there are a lot of engineering opportunities, and sometimes those engineering opportunities are intertwined with other disciplines like biology or psychology. So I had to look around that and see what I'm interested in. And I think that's been really helpful because now I'm researching at a neuroengineering lab. So I have neuroscience and engineering combined into something that I think is interesting. So really, from the application styles to what each school offered and what they were good at were definitely things that were different, and the majors they offered too.
Thank you. Just a follow up on that. What about the expectations on their side? Were there difference in terms of your GPAs, your SATs or community service or whatever else, or were they pretty much the same? Did you find a pattern between the two or differences between the two?
I don't want to say I noticed a specific pattern, because when I applied to both of them, I felt like it was, I don't know, I put everything out. So I basically gave Georgia Tech and UGA the same information, because that's what I did in my high school years. But I will say that for UGA, they do have another step forward when it comes to UGA honors. And so I know for that, it is a little more specific. And I can say that the application or the acceptance, I personally believe that the acceptance rate or the acceptance specificity is the same, is for GT and UGA honors are very similar, because a lot of students will get into UGA, or hopefully will get into UGA, but getting into UGA honors is definitely a harder step. And I know some friends who are very qualified and they've gone to other great universities, but they were not accepted to UGA honors, which is a little interesting. But yeah, I think they both have pretty similar standards. It just depends on where you want to go and what do you want to do.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I had a quick question to all the students studying. If you guys had to redo the application process, or if you were given another opportunity to go back to high school, what would you have done differently, or something that you should have done?
I would say one thing is probably if I could go back, I would apply to less schools. So I applied to 14 because I really wasn't sure where I wanted to go, and I didn't want to limit my options. And I got into 13 out of the 14. So going back, I think I knew that UGA was where I wanted to be, but I didn't want to feel like I was limiting options. But in that process, I put in a lot of, work and time into filling out all of these applications, when most of them were schools that I knew I wasn't really going to go to at the end of the day. So I would say maybe think hard about each of the colleges that you're going to apply to. Make sure that if you get in, you would actually consider going there. Definitely have safety schools as well. But I would just say, think about each school. If you are able to, tour them, or at the very least learn a little bit about them and their programs, so that you're not putting effort into an application for a university that you won't attend, even if you get in.
Thanks. That was helpful. Anybody else wants to take this?
I guess my side of that is maybe figuring out what I wanted to do. I think in my family, was the first one to go to high school like that. Not the first one to go to high school, but in the United States, I think I was the first one to kind of experience what that is and then go through the application process. So I learned a lot, and I'm definitely telling my sister what to do and what not to do, or what she wants to do. She should explore that. And I think that's something that Miss Moudgal, I believe I'm saying that right. That's what she said. And I truly believe that if you do what you want to do and explore the things that you want to explore, then you will have a more fruitful experience in high school, and you'll be able to understand, oh, maybe I want to do this thing in the future. Maybe I want to explore this more in college. So yeah, maybe not trying to follow what everyone else is saying, or maybe not joining all the clubs that your friends are joining, but being able to see what you like and then move forward with that, because it'll make your application much more real.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else wants to share their experience?
Recording stopped.
This is your last opportunity to vent out. Thank you, guys. And I guess since there are no more questions, I guess and further follow-up questions. Do you guys felt after you started your first year that, oh, this is not what I want to do, and you want to change, or is that very common, or pretty much you guys knew going in this is exactly what you wanted to do and there were no surprises?
I can say that I've pretty much known that I've wanted to be a veterinarian for, since I was pretty young. So for me, not necessarily. I will say, regardless, I know people, just like me who are I've known what I've wanted to do for a long time. Everyone goes to college and still has that little bit of, am I sure about that? Just because, you get to college and there's so many different majors and classes that you can take that, it never hurts to explore. So even though I've always known, that doesn't mean that, I didn't still take
recording in
classes
progress
subjects and things like that. I do know a lot of people, especially, with the pre-med track, obviously a lot of them come in saying they're pre-med and then, sometimes that changes along the way. I'm sure Mo can also talk about that. But yeah, and there's nothing wrong with either. I think a lot of times people don't realize how many options there are besides, the regular pre-med, engineer, lawyer. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with exploring, and I highly recommend, even if you think you know what you want to do, make sure you still, join a club that interests you or take a class that's interesting, even if it's not fully relevant to your major or future career.
Yeah, no, I agree with what Varsha said. I think coming on to GT's campus, I was a little skeptical of how the experience is going to be. I think a large part of that was due to the fact that I didn't get to explore many campuses before applying or while applying. And mainly because of COVID, that wasn't really possible for me. So coming on to GT was a lot of things coming at once, since it was my first time being on campus. And also the only people I knew there were people from my high school. But I think slowly throughout the years,
recording in progress,
and the people that I met, I kind of liked it more. And in terms of like the major and the career field that I want to go into, I guess I kind of knew I always wanted to do something related to life sciences and helping people. So
recording
along the lines of medical school, but I didn't know that there were much more things I can do with that. For example, I've learned more about public health and how you can help more communities, not just through medicine and science, but also through policymaking. So that's also been something I've been looking at. Another side I've been interested in is also how you can bring in modern technology into modern science, because you can't always rely on, the simple mixing chemicals in a lab and then giving it to a patient and helping them feel better. Because now humans are evolving, technology is evolving, so why not take use of that? And I feel like exploring that at this tech school really is allowing me to see different facets and different disciplines of how
recording
you can move
in
forward
progress
and use your interests and help them evolve and grow for the future. So yeah.
That was really helpful. Thank you, guys.
If they've not already asked, can you talk about some scholarships? Like what, I know you can apply for scholarships when you are actually applying for a college, but is there anything that I can do once I get into the college? Can I get some kind of money from somewhere to help me pay for my tuitions or dorm and anything of that sort?
Sure. So I can talk about scholarships before and after applying. So I was a National Merit finalist, and I did get the National Merit Scholarship as well. So if anyone has questions about that, or how, the application process and as you progress, how that works, I'm happy to answer those. I'm also an ambassador of the UGA Honors College. Like Amog was talking about, it is getting pretty competitive now, but if you have any questions about the Honors College at UGA, feel free to ask. It is a really awesome place to be. And they do also offer scholarships, after application and after being accepted throughout your 4 years at UGA. They do a lot of scholarships, especially for study abroad and research stipends, which are great opportunities if, you're interested in doing either research pre-med school or just research in general, or if, you're interested in studying abroad for a Maymester or a full semester or however long. So yeah, there are tons of scholarship opportunities before and after you are admitted to a college.
Yeah, adding on to what you said, there are different scholarship opportunities, and there are also the different scholarship opportunities that are out there can depend on different audiences. So there are financial-based scholarships for those who need financial aid. There are merit-based scholarships for those who, who don't necessarily need financial aid, but would like to get it because they've been working on something so hard. And this can be done through different programs at your university or through external organizations, because I know that there are many organizations that offer merit-based scholarships for those who deserve it. I can speak more about research scholarships because at Georgia Tech, I know many people have talked to my advisor about this, but at schools like UGA and Georgia Tech and Emory and other schools, they really encourage student research and they really encourage that progression of knowledge. So there are different scholarships that help you pay for research or make your time during research more fruitful in a sense. And at Georgia Tech, there's something called the Pura Award. And there's also something called the Petit Biomolecular Engineering Award. And just like that, there are different awards for each major and each school so that they can promote student growth and learning. And further, if you are planning on traveling to different conferences to present your research, they also do offer stipends on that note. And it's really worth noting that you can talk to professors and advisors about this because they would also know about this since they're the ones conducting research while they're not teaching a class. And really building off that, it is possible to get scholarships after graduating or after being enrolled in college.
Okay, thank you. So this is for Varsha. So you chose the vet major, right? Veterinarian major. So do you have to study more after your 4 years of undergrad, or do you have to start doing residency and then get into the practice?
Yeah, so I am on the pre-veterinary track. I'm just a regular bio major. There's no such thing as a pre-vet major at most colleges, honestly. So I'm taking pretty much the same classes that a pre-med student would take. And so it's very similar to med school. So I applied to vet schools. Next year, the application will open in January. And then just like med school, it's a 4-year post-grad program. You get your doctorate of veterinary medicine at the end of it. And then from there, it's, again, very similar to med school. If I want to specialize in anything, internal medicine, neurosurgeon, like anything of that sort, you would do anywhere from.
And it's a little harder to do student exchanges because the student would have to determine which country, which university they want to go to. And then they'd also have to determine if the classes they take at that university will transfer over to Georgia Tech. So there's a lot more work on that side. But I'll speak more about the structured, study abroad programs. And there are different ones. I think some of the more popular ones are Georgia Tech Lorraine, Georgia Tech's Oxford programs. I know for life sciences and chemical sciences, they have one in France, Lyon, France. They also have a Pacific program in Australia and New Zealand. And they have places all over the world, really. And essentially, what you'd want to do is first you have to apply for these study abroad programs. And then once you apply, they'll look at all the applications. They'll accept a group of students. Some programs will be larger than other programs. But once you do get accepted, then you'll have to select the classes that you want to take there. This is kind of the challenging part because generally you'd want to do study abroad program earlier. So maybe after your first year or maybe after your second year, because some of the classes that they offer, usually there would be prerequisite classes for other classes. So you'd want to take those classes earlier rather than pushing them off and then having a later graduation date, which is why advisors and professors recommend that you do study abroad programs earlier. And so once you do that, you select your classes, you go on the trip, and they have summer study abroad programs, they have fall study abroad programs, and they have spring study abroad programs. And once you're there, you're basically going to be taking those same classes with, I believe, Georgia Tech faculty, or they might be faculty from another university, but they work with Georgia Tech, and they will be I think on Georgia Tech campuses, or they'd be at some other university hosting them. I know some friends who went on a study abroad program this past summer. They went to Lorraine, France, and Georgia Tech, and they had a lot of fun. I think the schedule for them was Monday through Thursdays they'd be in class, so they'd be taking however many classes. I think 3 to 4 classes, and then they'd have 3-day weekends every week. So Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, they'd be free to, stay on the Georgia Tech campus in France and study. Or what a lot of people would do is they would travel all over Europe, because in Europe, traveling is much easier. So many countries are visa friendly. And also being in the European Union, you have access to use a train or fly around. So they would have those 3-day weekends to travel around, explore Europe, and then they'd come back Monday to Thursday, do classes, and then they could do it all again. So it's a very, very fun experience. Everyone who's done it really, really liked it. And when I talk to older college students or people who graduated from college, one of the most common regrets I've heard is not doing a study abroad program. So it's definitely worth looking into.
Okay, great. Then thank you. That was great information. Anybody else has any question? So yeah, one question for both of you is that if now that you are in college and like 2 years, 3 years into college, if you look back your high school life, what would you have done differently? Yeah, maybe enjoyed more, or anything, or studied more, prepared more, or done something less. What are your feelings about that? Or maybe nothing. You had done everything perfectly. It's possible too.
No, I would say, just in general, everyone will tell you this. Just don't forget to, just enjoy the high school experience. I know it's really easy to get sucked into, constantly worrying about grades and GPA and SAT scores. And obviously, those are all very important things. But, at the same time, those are really critical years of just, your teenage experience. So don't forget to, hang out with your friends, do fun stuff. And I know a lot of people that spent a lot of their high school years doing things that they thought would make them look good to colleges, but they weren't necessarily interested in or enjoying. So I would say, it's very important to, make sure you're doing things that you can put on your college application, but at the same time, make sure you're also doing things you're genuinely interested in and enjoying. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think balance is important. If you spend all your time doing work and classes, you'll really hate your high school years. But if you also spend all your time playing around or doing things that not necessarily helping you professionally, then you also won't be able to have that experience to learn or understand what it means to have a drive and ambition in a professional sense before you get to college. That being said, I think that a lot of times people who get worried will overstress the importance of doing so many things in high school, because once you get to college, whichever college you go to, you're in college. That's it. There's only one direction forward. And whatever you do from college there is like based on whatever your experience you build there. So I feel that in high school, you should really take the time to grow, not only professionally, but also personally. And that means if you are meeting new people and new friends, then you go have fun with them too. But if you also are interested in there's some organization that's doing some work or some internship, then you try doing your best to apply there as well, but not stressing yourself out in one area. I know that sometimes me or my friends would take a lot of hard classes in 1 year, and that would really decrease the amount of time we had for other things. So making sure that you don't stress yourself in that aspect as well. But yeah, after coming to college, I realized that there are a lot more things to do rather than like classes and, internships, because everything else in life is important as well. So, yeah.
Great. I think we got Advik and Anushka also, right? In the room now. Do we have them?
I worked at a different clinic.
Okay.
Yeah. For me, I am volunteering or / working with a physician at a clinic, and so I'm learning about how the doctor would go about her day and how they would treat patients. And it's really interesting because at this clinic, I get to see all kinds of patients. Sometimes they don't speak English, so we learn about different communication, and I do all sorts of that kind of stuff. So I get to see some patient interaction there. I also, and I mentioned this earlier, but I'm also doing research at a lab. And for me, this is something I've been wanting to do since high school, but I know in high school it's harder to find lab positions. But here I'm learning different research methods. I'm learning how to incorporate technology, and it's really interesting because at GT, they require that everyone takes at least one kind of basic level CS class. And after doing that, I was able to use that skill to help me get this position. So I never thought that it would help me in the long run, but lo and behold, learning Python allowed me to get this position, and I've been using it with whatever they've been having me do. And aside from that, I'm also a part of some clubs. I am in student government, and I'm also a part of this smaller club, but it's this neuroscience student advisory council. So essentially a group of neuroscience students such as myself, and we work with the neuroscience faculty and trying to bring up the neuroscience major and help develop it, and etc. So it's been really rewarding because I get to work closely with the faculty and professors, and I've also been able to learn more about GT and apply a lot of the things from classes to what I do in the real world.
Okay, great. Anyone else? We are waiting to close the breakout sessions now. Probably give 2 more minutes. So Shripriya, you are in the session, right? So can you just, you and Josna both, I know you both are very great singers and you've been learning music for a long time now. How are you trying to incorporate that into your career, or in whatever way that you are planning? Yeah, Josna, you can start, then Shripriya can take.
Okay, I've been following music since I was a kid, and I just wanted to keep that going. Honestly, I was not even thinking of becoming a music therapist earlier, like probably middle school, early high school. I was probably just thinking of going into the medical field or taking a degree in psychology. I always had plans to keep music in my life though, so I would always pursue competitions or shows, really any chance I can get to do music, to sing. But then I ended up doing an inquiry on music and how it affects the human mind and the human body. And because that was just an interesting concept for me. I want to learn everything about music, so I was wondering, okay, I wonder how this works. And then that's how I found out about music therapy. And I realized, wow, this kind of mixes all of my interests with neurology, psychology, and music. And I thought this is kind of the best way. I want to share my love of music to other people that might also like it too, that need some positive, enforcement in their life. So that's kind of how I thought, okay, well, music is my thing, and I want to follow that, that's what I want to be my career, because it's something that I'm interested in. So that's music, in a sense, really gave me the gift of finding my personality, finding my purpose and what I want to do. So that's kind of my story there.
Okay, thank you. Shripriya?
I'm majoring in biological engineering, so I guess music doesn't have a lot to do with that. But I still keep my practice. I do my practice every day, so it gives me a nice break from having to study instead of having to study all the time. So I was in my senior year, I was really debating whether to do a music major or do biological engineering. I was interested in both. So since music is an uncertain field, I chose to do biological engineering. But I think I'm going to keep practicing music and keep on going to competitions and recording new songs. So hopefully I can also become a musician.
Good luck. So, thank you. I have a question from the audience. It's I get nervous about grades and ACT, and I can't enjoy my subject. I cannot enjoy my subjects. So Anushka, can you answer? Can you take this? They wanted to know if there is any advice that you can provide to be able to enjoy my studies.
Yeah, sure. I think a big thing is finding something that you really like. And I think in high school, it's hard because, you have the same classes to take that everybody else takes, and you're kind of forced into taking those. But the really nice thing about college is that you have the option to take what you want to take. And I think it's important when you're looking at colleges to, especially if you're unsure about your major, to find a place where they give you the opportunity to explore. A lot of colleges don't make you declare your major until your second year, especially where I go to Emory. You can take a lot of whatever classes you want in your freshman year to kind of figure out what you enjoy. And so I know people who thought they would be chem majors, but now they really like anthropology because they're taking an introduction to anthropology class. Or I think a lot of people here like music, and a lot of people came in thinking, oh, I'll do STEM, but they're really enjoying their time in the orchestra. So I think college is a great time for exploration. So even if you're in high school and you're feeling very unsure, you'll find your thing in the end. And you should just be looking forward to that and not worrying about it.
Thank you. So looks like I'm going to close all rooms, and I will have everybody back into the main session. So this will give everybody 60 seconds to leave their breakout rooms and come back to the main session. Okay. So in 18 seconds. So yeah, while everyone else comes back to this room. So kids, all the kids, I'm very extremely grateful, thankful that you all made time in, with your busy schedule in the college, you made time for us and came and shared your knowledge. So just the last bit is Divakar from the Rupatunga Kannada Kutta is going to come back and talk few words, okay? Divakar, you can take over.
Yeah, thank you, Mangla. Yeah, I'm sure everyone found this session very helpful. Like it was close to 2 hours. Yeah, over 2 hours, and it was very, very informative. And Mangla, our heartfelt thanks. Thanks to you for your active partnership with NKK and your initiatives for the community and organizing this event. And Rupatunga Kannada Kutta is very appreciative of your time. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And lastly, and very importantly, we thank the youth of our community for sharing all of their experience and wisdom. And having been through the college admission process by themselves, yeah, that was very, very informative session, and we really appreciate your time. And we wish you the best of luck with the rest of your college. All right. All right, Mangla, I think, are we good to close the session? Yeah. All right.
Thanks again.
Thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you.
Thank you for holding this meeting, guys.
Thank you.
ಮಂಗ್ಲ ಇದು ವಿಡಿಯೋ ನಮ್ಮ ಲೋಕಲ್ ಮೆಷಿನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಅಪ್ಲೋಡ್ ಅಥವಾ
ಒಂದ್ ನಿಮಿಷ, ಲೆಟ್ ಮಿ ಸ್ಟಾಪ್ ದ ರೆಕಾರ್ಡಿಂಗ್.
Recording stopped.
So once you end the session, you leave the meeting, it will start loading into your laptop, local laptop.
ಆಮೇಲೆ ಅಪ್ಲೋಡ್
ಹಾ,
ಮಾಡೋದು.
ಅದನ್ನ ಸುದೀಪ್ ಅಥವಾ ಯಾರಾದ್ರೂ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಲೊಕೇಶನ್ ಕೊಟ್ರೆ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಅಪ್ಲೋಡ್ ದ ಫೈಲ್. ನನ್ನ ಹತ್ರನೂ ಇದೆ. whoever has recorded can upload their file.
Okay, okay.
Okay?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Good job, Abhi. So I'm ending the meeting and Sudeep. ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಓಕೆ, ಇದು ಬ್ರೇಕ್ಔಟ್ ಸೆಷನ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಆಗಿರಲ್ಲ ರೆಕಾರ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ. ಸೊ ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಎಲ್ಲಾರು ಮಾಡಿದವ್ರೆಲ್ಲಾರು ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು.